I realized my new neighbor was an alpha when he sniffed out my lie faster than my cat finds chicken. Evening stitched itself across the glass flank of Iris Tower, rain dragging silver threads down the windows and making the whole city look like it was breathing underwater. From my living room, minimalist on purpose, forgettable by design, I watched the moving truck back into the loading bay 12 floors below. A man stepped out, no hurry, no swagger. He moved like a held breath. He lifted boxes one-handed, nothing showy, just a steady calculation of weight and balance. Military, I thought, not because of the haircut or the build, which, fine, was textbook, but because each motion looked like it had been argued with and then approved by some internal protocol. The way he checked corners without turning his head. The way he let the elevator doors close on a polite smile before anyone else could step in with him. Morph, my cat, hopped onto the sill, smearing fog across the glass with his whiskers. His ears flattened. A low rattle started in his chest. Morph saves this noise for the vet, vacuum cleaners, and, apparently, new neighbors. Don't start, I told him, as if either of us could help it. 12 floors down, the man tipped his chin up. Just a fraction, a catch of light where his eyes should be, and I got the strangest feeling that he was counting windows. Not with his eyes, with his attention, and when his gaze arrived at mine, it felt like a polite knock on a door I never gave him the address for. I stepped back and laughed at myself. Paranoia is a survival skill, sure, but it can still be embarrassing. By the time I met him in person, I had decided 3 things. He was a professional. He didn't want to be noticed, and I would not be the one to notice him. The elevator didn't care about my decisions. I was returning from the mailroom with a stack of bland envelopes when the doors slid open. And there he was, alone in a bright rectangle of brushed steel and rain-spotted light. Closer, he was worse, taller than I'd estimated, the kind of presence that made the air hold itself straight. The damp on his jacket smelled like clean concrete, and something sharper underneath, like citrus cut with iron. "Evening," he said, voice low, vowels smoothed by disuse. "Welcome to Iris," I said, and hated how it sounded like I handed out keys. "I'm new," he said, not missing a beat. He had eyes you couldn't fight with, calm, exact, and a habit of looking at you and past you at once, like a man scanning a room that happened to have you in it. "I'm Ethan. Jasper," I said, because lies should be rationed, and this one, my new name, had to last. Apartment 1207. He didn't offer a number back. He didn't need to. We both knew where he'd be. The elevator's side closed. We rode. The cable hummed. Rain printed itself across the glass shaft. I kept my eyes on the floor counter and told myself to breathe like a person who didn't have contingency plans taped behind baseboards. "You work nights?" Ethan asked. "Freelance." I lifted the stack of envelopes like they proved it. Catalogs, junk, a credit card offer for a man I didn't legally exist as. "Consulting." "Security?" he asked. "Coffee." I lied. "I consult coffee." It was almost funny. Morph would have bought it. Humans were trickier. Ethan's mouth did something that wasn't a smile but had the decency to try. "You know you smell like a lie," he said. It should have irritated me. It stabbed under my ribs instead. "I wash my lies thoroughly," I said. "Cold soak. Line dry." His gaze flicked to my face, precise and fast, like a cursor on a screen. "That's better," he said, as if we had just adjusted a dial together. The doors opened on 12, with a soft hydraulic hush. Mina, the betta fish of our building, all bright chatter and sudden turns, was there with a cake balanced on one hand and a phone in the other. "Oh," she breathed, lashes latching on to the nearest handsome gravity well. "You must be the new tenant." "I'm Mina. Welcome. We have an HOA, but it's polite, mostly because I'm on it." "Hi, Mina," Ethan said. No eye roll, no fidget. If he disliked being ambushed by friendliness in frosting form, he did not show it. "Captain of manliness," she declared, approving his posture like a uniform inspection. "This stairwell has never felt safer." I bit the inside of my cheek to keep the laugh from leaking out. "At least one person in this building is without sin," I murmured, and stepped around them with Morph's carrier slung high like a shield. Morph chose that moment to poke his paw out and swipe at Ethan's sleeve. Cloth whispered. Claws did not connect. Ethan didn't flinch. Morph stared at him, pupils blown, and hissed at Ethan's reflection in the elevator door. I pretended that was normal. Mina shoved the cake into Ethan's hands, mugged a goodbye at me, and drifted away like a benevolent storm cloud. Ethan looked down at the cake, then up at my face. I don't eat sugar, he said. Try lying about it, I offered. Apparently I'm aromatic. He looked like he might argue, or explain, or casually take apart the world and hand it back to me in labeled pieces. Instead, he tipped the box toward me. Take half. I don't eat neighbors, I said. Generally. He huffed something like a laugh. It was quiet, efficient. We split hallways, mine on the left, his on the right. Whether he paused or I moved first, I can't say. But a second later I was at my door, key turning out of habit more than need, and he was standing in the corridor, still, head tilted a degree off-center, the posture of a man listening to a frequency too high for anyone else. The metal panel beside my door was polished enough to catch a man's outline like a shy mirror. In it, I saw Ethan's shoulders square, his throat work once as if swallowing a word he didn't choose to say. He didn't look at me, he looked through everything. Plaster, studs, the thin membrane of privacy iris. Tower promised in glossy brochures, and it left a chill on my skin wherever the imaginary line ran. Problem? I asked, because sometimes stepping toward danger is less frightening than waiting for it. Water pressure, he said, distracted. A beat. And you? I'm very hydrating, I told him. Neighbors report improved skin. The corner of his mouth remembered what smiling was. Good night, Jasper. Welcome to Iris, I said, and shut the door before I could ask him whether he was the kind of man who believed in coincidences. Inside, the silence reassembled itself. The apartment smelled like rain and clean electronics. Lights slid on in a practiced gradient. Cameras blinked their tiny green reassurances. I set the mail on the counter and pretended to read it, while my pulse tapped like a telegraph against my wrist. Morph climbed my leg like a ladder and flung himself onto the counter to stare at the door. His tail made a single irritated question mark. I know, I said. He walks like a decision. I fed the cat. I washed a cup I hadn't dirtied. I opened my laptop and watched the night shift unspool on the building's public security feed. Iris Tower is a cathedral to transparency, glass, light, reflection, the worship of seeing. It makes people honest by exhausting their options. On screen, Ethan moved through the lobby, exchanging nods with the concierge, signing something without looking. At it, turning his head fractionally toward the camera once, as if to let it know he knew it was there. He did not check his phone. He did not fidget. He did not perform. If he was the show, he was also the audience. You can't live here, I told the picture on my screen. I already took the spot for the man who notices everything. The picture did not answer. I should have worked. There were reports to file, an inbox fat with other people's messes. Instead, I went to the window, pressed my palm to the cool glass, and let the city press back. Rain opened and shut like 1,000 eyes. Far below, red taillights braided themselves in patient lines. Across the vertical canyon of the inner atrium, another window flared to life. Ethan's. He walked into view, jacket off, shirt sleeves pushed to his forearms. Not posing, just present. He reached for something out of frame, and for a second, his reflection lined up with mine in the glass between us. A trick of angle, of distance, of wishful thinking. Morph hissed again, soft this time, and tapped the glass with one velveted paw as if testing it for a secret door. It's fine, I lied, to the cat or to the glass or to the piece of me that had gone very still to listen. We've had worse neighbors. The building sighed. Pipes spoke. Somewhere 2 floors up, a laugh rang down a stairwell. I did not realize I had drifted back to the door until my fingers found the deadbolt like a rosary. I didn't open it. I didn't have to. The metal panel reflected the hallway in ghostly grayscale. Ethan stood there, at my door, or near it, still and thoughtful, head turned just enough that I could see the line of his jaw. He was not looking at the peephole. He was listening to the hum in the walls, to the way apartments sound, when they're occupied by a man trying very hard to be unremarkable. For a heartbeat that felt like a misplaced lifetime, we were 2 silhouettes, separated by engineered privacy and a sheet of polished metal. He lifted his hand, not to knock, but to rest 2 fingers lightly on the doorframe, as if feeling for a pulse. I stepped back into shadow. In the panel, my reflection vanished. After a long moment, he exhaled, a sound more sensed than heard, and walked away down the corridor. The rain kept writing its long, patient lines across the city. I put my ear to the door and told myself it was only the plumbing. It wasn't. It was the beginning. The rain switched to Morse code sometime after midnight. Dots and dashes streaked down the windows, tapping out a message I pretended not to read. I kept my own message simple. Keep the lights low. Keep the screens dim. Keep my pulse a secret. Iris Tower did the rest. Glass partitions divided the apartment into sleek zones. A kitchen that looked like a showroom. A bedroom that looked like a brochure. A living room that looked like I never sat down. Cameras winked in their ceiling recesses. Tiny green stars I had installed myself, and then swore not to think about. On the wall, the main screen glowed a soft, expensive blue. Coffee first. The machine sighed, a quiet luxury. The scent bloomed, dark, a little floral, grounding. I wrapped both hands around the mug to convince my nerves we lived in a body that did ordinary things at ordinary hours. The night's work waited in my inbox. Police consults, private contracts, all the gray zones for which people paid obscene sums when they preferred not to ask publicly. I skimmed reports, annotated, assembled truth from the crumbs people dropped when they thought no one was sweeping. "You're a janitor with better metadata," an old partner used to say. He was not wrong. Mina pinged me first, as she always did when the building was extra shiny with rain. "Mina? You up?" Me, "No. Sleep typing." Mina, "Crisis." Me, "The HOA discovered a succulent that violates the charter." Mina, "Worse. There's a god in the lobby." Mina, "Tall good posture says PLS with his eyes." Mina, "I'm reorganizing my entire moral code." I took a sip and let myself smile before I looked at the lobby cam. Ethan was there, of course, speaking with the concierge, signing the delivery ledger. He had a way of standing that made everyone else look like they were trying too hard at either casual or formal. He didn't try at either. He just existed with a terrible competence, like a chair that would never wobble. He noticed the concierge's pen was dying, swapped it without comment. He steady-handed a cumbersome package for a woman with a stroller while phasing his body so the toddler's flailing feet never came close. He never checked his phone. He never fidgeted. He looked up once, not at the camera but at the ceiling, acknowledgement without performance. The feed felt seen. "Mina, tell me you're watching." Me, "Watching." Mina, "With him here, I would dust." Mina, me, "Dust." I typed, erased, typed again. "With him here we'll all confess then." Thought better of it, and sent a neutral sticker of a cat sweeping. By 2 a.m., my reports were tidy enough to pass for industrious. I sent the last redact, closed 3 windows, opened one I shouldn't. The private building grid flushed alive, elevator interior, garage ramp, stairwell, landing, the long glass throat of the atrium with its suspended walkways. Security privileges were a tide. Mine came in and out with the schedules of men who didn't know the right questions to ask. I watched Ethan move through the building like he was learning its grammar by ear. In the service corridor, he slowed, tilted his head, and pressed his palm to a humming panel, as if listening to a wall. In the elevator, he stepped aside for a man sprinting last minute, then braced, his shoulder discreetly to absorb the man's sudden weight as the floor shifted. In the north stairwell, he paused on a landing and looked up as if counting floors without numbers. "Too correct," Mina would say, as if he'd read the manual in the subtext. She called 10 minutes later without warning, because Mina believed in phone calls the way other people believed in saints. "Do you see him?" she demanded, breathless, voice echoing under a hood of rain. He fixed the temporary badge reader with a paperclip and a glare. "You make it sound like a miracle. In this tower, a working badge reader is a miracle." She made a pleased noise. "He also told Mr. Kaplan to stop vaping by the fire stairs, and Mr. Kaplan stopped. Do you understand the magnitude?" "Truly a god," I said, watching Ethan help the front desk print a new tenant packet without taking over, just making space. "Do you have a crush or a security analysis?" "Both. Jasper, with this man around, even I would dust." "With this man around," I said, We're all on our best behavior. He's looking up at your side of the atrium, she sing-songed. Coincidence, I said too fast. Oh, honey. Mina sighed in that way people do when they're folding you into a story you didn't consent to. In this building, the only coincidences are curated. She hung up to go curate one. Mina liked to send baked goods into the gravitational fields of handsome men and observe the results for science. I set the phone down and told myself to be bored. Boredom is the safest state of mind. It requires nothing. It reveals nothing. Be beige. Be background. Be glass. Lightning stitched the sky. The windows flashed the tower's bones. And for a second, an unhelpful, irreversible second, the reflection in my living room partition didn't match me. The glass wall separated the kitchen from the rest of the space, a pane as tall as a confession. In it I should have seen my posture, my mug, the table, the soft rectangle of the screen. Instead, I saw a hand. Not mine. Bigger. The knuckles greased with blood. The palm slick. The fingers flexing like something metal had just been forced from them. The gun hit tile. A girl sobbed in a stairwell. My chest hurt like a pulled muscle from years ago. I blinked. The hand was my hand again. A pale copy holding coffee that tasted like nothing. Morph appeared with the urgency of a furry paramedic, scrambled up a chair back, and thumped his paw against the glass. A velveted tap, then another, claws sheathing and unsheathing. He meowed at the reflection, long and complaining, as if the ghost in it had tracked wet footprints on his clean floor. It's the storm, I told him. The building is a prism. The past refracts. He didn't buy metaphors. He never had. His ears flattened toward the atrium. He stared at the window, at the other window beyond it, where the opposite apartment's lights made a soft box in the rain. Ethan moved through that light, shoulder line neat even out of uniform, sleeves pushed up. He said something on his counter, paused, and, no. He didn't look at me. He looked at the glass between us like a man checking a mirror for shaving cuts that aren't there. I closed my eyes and inventoried my body the way I cataloged evidence. Heart, fast, not panicked. Breath, clipped, shallow. Muscles, primed, not ready to run. Brain, lying to itself with exquisite professionalism. Work, I told myself. Work is a location where nothing bad happens because you are already in the bad thing and therefore immune. The next consult was out of Denver. I toggled windows, pulled camera timestamps, highlighted a man's mistake with a polite little flag and an invoice to match. Another came in from a state trooper who'd been told by her captain to stop emailing me and by her conscience to keep emailing me. I wrote what she needed to say in her own words and sent it back as if she'd written it first. When the kettle popped for a refill, I stood, stretched, and scrolled to the service feeds again, like a thumb to a bruise. The garage ramp camera showed rain pooling in the concrete lip, a glassy coin accepting 1,000 impacts. A delivery driver fishtailed and overcorrected. Before I could swear, a figure stepped into frame, one hand up, 2 steps decisive, and then fluid. Ethan again, of course. Spinning the driver's panic into control with the practiced touch of a man redirecting a bad idea before it grew teeth. He spoke, small movements, calming through the glass and the rain, and then tapped the hood twice like a benediction. The driver breathed. The car settled. The camera blinked back to its usual apathy. Too correct, I said to the empty room, quoting Mina. It came out softer than I meant. My phone buzzed again. Mina, update, he can use a printer. Mina also told me my emergency binder is excellent. Mina, tell me I'm pretty. Me, your binder is pretty. Mina, with him here even the dust bunnies will put on bow ties. She called before I could answer, and I let it ring into message because my reflection had decided to be unhelpful again. Not just a hand this time. A tile floor, wet with, no. I didn't let the word complete itself. A metal door that had stuck on humid days, a man's shoe slipping. The high thin sound people make when they don't know which part of them is injured yet. I stared. The scene didn't change. That was worse. The past is supposed to be fixed, a museum exhibit with a velvet rope. This felt like a window half cracked in a storm, letting air in where it was never meant to go. Morph, I said, and I don't know if I meant it as a warning or a plea. He was already there. tail like a punctuation mark, nose to the glass. He touched the pane once, twice, 3 times, as if trying codes. Then he hissed, not at the memory, but at something behind me. I turned too fast. Across the atrium, that soft box of light held Ethan's kitchen at a diagonal to mine. He had his palms braced on the counter, elbows locked, a position that could be fatigue or prayer. He lifted his head, the lines of his face going sharp in the reflected city. He looked at his window, which meant looking at my window, which meant looking at the thin place between us where 2 panes made a reluctant mirror. Common sense, he couldn't see me unless I stood in full view and waved. Survival sense, he couldn't smell me through glass and weather and ductwork. Alpha sense, I thought, more superstition than science. He could know ignoring things was my favorite camouflage. Coincidence, I told the air. It was my least convincing tone. He checks all the windows when the storm hits. Anyone would. Mina's voice arrived as a voicemail, the kind that came with video because she believed narration required visuals. With this one, I would dust, she announced from the hallway, panning, the camera down to the lobby like a B-list nature documentary. Behold the alpha in his curated habitat. Note how he respects the boundaries of pack and printer. I laughed even as my stomach stayed at half-mast. Humor and dread make an efficient cocktail. By 3, the building settled into its late watchfulness. The elevator made fewer trips. The garage grew echoey. The rain recalibrated to a steadier band. I shut down the feeds like extinguishing candles, one by one, until only the atrium view remained. Bed, I told Morph. He disagreed. He threaded himself around my ankles and escorted me to the glass door that led to my narrow balcony. The city air slipped in when I cracked it, wet and metallic, the taste of railings and sky. I pressed my fingers to the cold pane, the way a child tests a mirror for a trick passage. Nothing, I told the glass. Nothing to show, nothing to tell. The glass did not argue. It simply kept its double book, the room as it was, and the room as it remembered. For a heartbeat, the 2 columns didn't balance. In the reflection, a gun skittered across tile, a hand came down hard. A girl breathed like someone who had learned how again after forgetting. Then the ledger closed. My hand was my hand. My face, my face. A tired man in a tidy box, pretending he'd designed it that way. Across the gulf, in his own box of light, Ethan turned off his kitchen and stepped out of frame. The rain kept writing its earnest code. I stood in a room made for transparency, and failed, with meticulous care, to see through myself. The laundry room on 12 is what happens when architects try to apologize for shared appliances. White tile, white light, chrome that reflects your pores back at you. The washers look like clinical instruments that just happen to accept quarters. The whole place smells like detergent with ambition, mountain air, ocean breeze, other lies. I went at 2 in the morning, the hour when even the insomniacs are bored of themselves. I carried a mesh bag of sheets and exactly enough coins to pretend I belonged. I was aiming for the particular privacy only the hum of machines can grant. Of course, he was already there. Ethan stood with his hip against a washer, sleeves cut off a black tee, so the muscle of his shoulder looked like something drawn with a ruler. His uniform pants, security blue and unforgiving, were folded on a counter, in precise squares, as if they were maps of a place he knew by heart. On the open machine beside him, a pair of damp gloves hung like molted skin. He glanced up when I stepped in, not startled, not guarded, just aware, the way a tuned instrument is aware of a note. Late, he said. Laundry is my nightlife, I answered, and dropped the mesh bag with a sound like static. You reserve the room with a blood oath, or first come first suds? He huffed something that might have been a laugh. There's room. The fluorescent lighting did him no favors, and somehow, every favor. The tendons in his forearms were neat, the veins a sensible blue. Soap bubbles crawled down the inside of the washer door in patient cells. And his reflection, a little doubled, a little ghost, moved with them. I loaded sheets. I measured detergent like it mattered. He watched me do both as if it did. Cold, he said, nodding at the dial. Keeps the lies from shrinking, I said, before I could help myself. Humor is a reflex. Some people flinch. I deflect. He didn't bite. He watched the machine take my quarters. Then, after a beat that lasted exactly as long as it needed to, he said, "You don't have a smell." I stared at him. "I promise that's not true. Everyone has a scent," he said. "Not just cologne or soap. Heat, habit, what a day did to them. With you it's like someone—" His hand hovered, fingers open, as if he could pluck descriptors out of the bright air. "Went through and erased the marks. Like the pages there, and the ink isn't useful," I said lightly, heartbeat making the tiles hum. "If you prefer to be unremarkable, is that what you prefer?" It wasn't a challenge. It was an earnest question, which was somehow worse. I shrugged and tapped the washer door with 2 fingers, as if blessing a voyage. Iris Tower pays good money for transparent privacy. I tried to meet the dress code. The machine groaned into life, water hitting the drum like hard rain. He slid his damp gloves from their perch, wrung them once. The motion released the faintest exhale of leather and metal and the outside, wet concrete, ozone. "I grew up around men who thought silence was a virtue," I said, before I could decide not to. The humming air had loosened something. Turned out they just liked not being asked questions. "And you?" he asked. "I enjoy questions," I said. "On paper." He turned one glove inside out. The lining darkened as it surrendered the water. "On paper smells like nothing," he said. "That's the problem." He tossed the gloves into his washer and hit the cycle with 2 decisive fingers. We stood in the brief stillness between one machine starting and the next, a pocket of quiet that felt like the underside of a storm. "You fixed the badge reader," I said, to say something that wasn't about me. "Mina is building an altar." He didn't smile, but his mouth softened as if relieved to be discussing technology instead of souls. "Temporary." The contact tab was bent. "She said you did it with a paperclip and a glare." "The paperclip helped," he said. "The glare is standard." He moved past me to the sink, the air between us compressing as his shoulder cleared mine by an inch. I didn't step away. He didn't, either. When skin brushes skin by accident, the body decides what story to tell about it. My pulse wrote 3 that I refused to read. His wrist knocked mine. Warm, dry, human. And then the smallest shock, as if whatever inside me had been listening all night finally recognized an old frequency and stood up too fast. The flinch that moved through me wasn't fear. It had the shape of fear, and none of the taste. It was memory being found. His hand stilled on the faucet. Not dramatically, not even visibly if you were not looking for it. But I was looking. A white thread of a scar crossed his inner forearm, thin, diagonal, the kind of healed injury that holds a story under it, like a pressed flower. I knew it. I knew the angle because my hand had been at that angle when I grabbed the boy who had thrown himself in front of his sister. I knew the length because I had measured it with my stuttering breath, counting the seconds I had to keep him moving. I knew the way a knife can graze a bone without owning it. He turned his wrist to reach the soap, and the overhead light drew the line clean. A single pale stroke, where the blade had kissed and backed away, years ago, in a stairwell that had smelled like boiled paint and fear. A girl's sobbing had echoed like a metronome, while sirens took their time remembering us. "Old?" I asked, and the words sounded like I didn't know what words were for. He rinsed his hands, dried them on a disposable towel, as if the paper deserved the courtesy. "Long time," he said. "How?" He leveled his eyes to mine. "Bad day. Someone else's." The washers settled into their work, a symphony of circular promises. He tossed the towel, missed by a centimeter, then corrected it with an easy wrist so the arc looked intentional. Men like him always looked intentional. I realized I had edged closer, body a compass needle, unwilling to lie. "You ever going to tell me what you actually consult on?" he asked. "If I told you, I'd have to give you a binder," I said. "It's against HOA policy to cause that much joy in a hallway." Mina would disagree. "In this building, Mina is a doctrine, not a person." He allowed that. The overhead light buzzed and stilled, the flicker of cheap fluorescence wearing a posh fixture. He leaned sideways to check the timing on my machine without invading it. 18 minutes, he said. "You can smell time now?" I asked. He tilted his head, listening. "I can hear the cycle shift." "That's not how cycles work," I said, because pedantry is a fine veil. They're dictated by the washers. They don't listen back. Everything listens, he said. Or something breaks. He reached to adjust the level on my machine where the cheap building floor sloped. His fingers found the rubber foot, with the unconscious grace of a man who has cared enough about small things to keep big ones from failing. His hand brushed mine again. No accident this time, just physics, and some stubborn wire under my sternum hummed in answer. 1207, he said, and it took me a half-second to realize he was repeating the number I'd told him the night we met. Not a test, a note. Your memory's very neighborly, I said. You stand very still when you want to be ignored, he said, equally neutral. And you catalog everything you're not supposed to say, I returned. He nodded once. On paper. We let the talk fall apart on that, as if we'd both agreed we'd said enough true things for a maintenance room. I leaned back against the counter, the laminate cool through my shirt. He stood a mirror of me on the other side. Weight even, no fidget, as if standing were an occupation with metrics. The washers rotated. The doors made a faint funhouse of our faces, curving our mouths into nervous smiles we didn't own. You keep your scent erased, he said, quieter now, as if it were a secret he wanted me to overhear. But there's something under it. The way metal smells if lightning has been near it. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. I'm flattered to be weather. It's not a complaint, he said. It's an observation. He lifted his arm, rubbed the scar with the back of 2 fingers in an absent, economical way that men use when they don't want to admit a thing aches. The gesture pulled me forward like a string. That scar, I said, voice gone thin. You got it protecting someone. He held my gaze the way you hold a heavy square, carefully, deliberately. Yes. You were a kid, I said, and there it was, finally, my control giving the past a chair. A stairwell. The door stuck on humidity. Your sister? My sister, he said. An agreement that made the room tilt. You were there. His words were not a question, and they didn't accuse. They just lay down between us like a shared jacket on cold ground. For a second the fluorescent hum became the summer buzz of a cheaper building. The rain became sprinkler, spit. The soap smell became that wet metal tang that never leaves you once you've earned it. A boy had stood with his arms out, ridiculous and brave, and a man had moved through him like a solution. The knife found skin and argument. The girl had made a sound when she realized the blade had missed her, and hit something she loved. The washer clicked a gear and brought me back with a rush that left my chest sore. I fix things that go wrong after other people swear they went right, I said. That's what I consult on. He nodded, as if I'd handed him a tool he'd been missing, even if it didn't come with directions. Good, he said softly. We folded the silence then, each of us making corners. He reached past me for the mesh bag on the counter. Our knuckles bumped again, small heat on cold laminate. Sorry, he said. It's fine, I said, and meant, it is not fine at all, and that is interesting. He transferred his washed gloves to the dryer with a care that looked like ritual. I pretended to scroll my phone, and instead counted his heartbeats by the cadence of his breathing. 12. 16. Slower than mine, which had escaped. When his cycle ended, he shook out the tea he'd washed with his uniform, and snapped it twice with precise wrists, as if erasing ghosts out of the cotton. He dressed back into his competence, the tea an unceremonious black against his skin, the scar tucked away, obedience under fabric. Good night, Jasper, he said at the door. Don't fix anything major without filing a ticket, I said. The HOA likes its paperwork irritated. He let that be funny. I'll try. After he left, I stood alone with my sheets turning in their small weather. The white light flattened everything. The smell of detergent tried to stand in for safety and failed by a hair. I pressed my palm to the washer door, felt the centrifugal force tug at my skin, and imagined a world where you could get clean by sheer speed. If he's who I think he is, I thought, I'm finished. Or worse, I'm starting. Later, back in my apartment, Iris Tower glittered like a conscience. Across the atrium, his window was a cool square cut into night. I drifted to the glass without admitting it, and found us both there. Anyway, my face and his, layered by reflections I couldn't untangle. For a stolen second, the panes aligned, and the two of us occupied the same imagined space, an overlay of mouth and line and breath. Under the skin, I told the window as if it needed a title, and let the lights go dark. Daylight does Iris Tower no favors. At night, glass is a secret. By day, it's a spreadsheet that lists everything you don't want totaled. The lobby gleamed to the point of anesthesia. White stone, mirrored columns, the kind of reception desk that looks like it would file a complaint if you breathed near it. I was carrying dry cleaning I didn't need when my phone lit with a building alert, audit, resident verification, a neat banner, a polite font. My pulse punched the elevator button 3 times like it owed me money. There are audits, and there are audits. The first kind checks boxes. The second checks bones. Mina's text landed before the doors opened. Mina, don't freak out. Me, terrific note, thank you. Mina, a consultant from city security just came in. Mina, tall, squared off hair, moral spine like rebar. Mina, smile filed under unused. I didn't need a name. My body supplied one anyway, a reflex from an older life where people's faces came with footnotes. Ryan. The elevator doors parted. I didn't get out. I watched from a metal box while a man I used to call partner crossed the lobby like he'd practiced it, feet planted. Gaze level, badge zipped into a leather folio that looked like it came with its own rules of engagement. He shook the concierge's hand like it was a test everyone should pass. He did not look up at the cameras, which meant he knew where they were. I rode to 12, stepped into a corridor so polished the air squeaked, and set. The dry cleaning down on my console table like a peace offering to furniture. The apartment chirped a second later. Notice, temporary access check. Please prepare identification. It even had a cheerful chime, the administrative equivalent of a kid selling you a haunted doll. Panic isn't loud. It's neat. It sorts. It makes lists while you pretend to look for a pen. I texted Mina. Me, how fast? Mina, he's starting on floors 1 to 6. Mina, Ethan is shadowing him. Standard procedure. Me, standard is a strong word. I didn't ask why Ethan. Of course, Ethan. The tower uses competence like a salve until the jar is empty. Mina, BTW, is there anything you would like to not exist for the next 20 minutes? Me, I have a devotional candle to no lit at all times. Mina, cool. Mina, asking because I might accidentally make elevator B jam between 7 and 9. Mina, purely for cardio. I stared at the message, felt my mouth try on a smile it didn't have time for, and typed, do it. Okay, Mina said out loud on a call without waiting for permission. My friend, breathe. I'm going to commit a minor mechanical sin for you. I will be pretty about it. The line clicked off. 10 seconds later, the building gave a theatrical sigh. A maintenance alert bleeped a discreet apology. In the camera grid on my wall, elevator B froze mid-rise with 2 suit-wearing men inside. Mina's head popped in the frame from the other side of the doors, hair perfect, clipboard a weapon, her mouth doing the diplomatic smile of someone explaining to authority that authority would be waiting. Time is elastic if you bully it. I had it, suddenly, a slice thick enough to use. The apartment looked like every upscale cage in the city, crisp lines, reflective surfaces, nothing to snag a story on. That was true for the living spaces, not the wall behind the framed blueprint of a building that was never built. I took it down and set it on the floor as gently as if it were sleeping. Behind it, the drywall patch I'd painted with the exact shade of corporate eggshell. Behind that, 4 screws. Behind those, the cavity that held what I couldn't afford to forget and couldn't explain if found. Old hard drives, a thumb drive wrapped in cloth, a little notebook with cheap paper because expensive paper feels like a confession, one folded shirt with the wrong name stitched into the tag, a talisman of the person I am not. I didn't plan to burn anything. Fire leaves a smell that tells a story even after you lose the book, but I could make the room less interesting. I opened the notebook to a random page, map arrows, dates, the shorthand. Only 2 people knew how to read, and tore 3 sheets cleanly. I fed them to the shredder under the console, watched the confetti become silence. I took the shirt out, held the name between my fingers until my skin told it nothing, then shoved it deep into a bag of donations I'd been avoiding for months. The drives I turned in my hands and set back. I wanted them where they were. A crime is a thing, a conscience is a place. I replaced the panel, spun the screws home, pressed the blueprint back onto its hooks. The apartment reassembled itself like an alibi. I walked into the bathroom because that's what you do when you're trying to find a better face to wear. The mirror over the sink was vast and expensive and lied like a professional. It usually returned me the version of myself Iris Tower had curated. Clean lines, clean. Shave. A man who looked like he belonged in rooms with wide views and narrow thresholds. Today, the glass had other plans. At first it was a shimmer at the edges, as if the reflection were a bad stream buffering. Then the image buckled in the center, and the light thinned as if the room had taken an uneven breath. The man in the mirror tilted like a photograph hung crooked. My hand lifted to fix it, and didn't fix anything. In the mirror, a hand, bigger than mine, not mine, was slick to the wrist. The gun skittered across tile. The sound had the old sharpness, the kind of noise that refuses to age. A stairwell with green paint that never dried properly. A girl's eyes wide as the idea of a second chance. The knife. The angle. The boy's thin arm catching metal meant for someone smaller. My vision tunneled so hard the world became a straw. Morph, I said, because some part of me still called emergency services by their fur. He came like a siren anyway. Claws scalloping tile, tail inflated to comic punctuation. He jumped onto the counter and scratched at the mirror. Claws catching on nothing, the sound both ridiculous and knife-true. The reflection didn't go away. It grew. Not just a replay, but a palimpsest, the past written on the present until both bled through. And there, in the negative space, the outline of a palm print bloomed on the glass. Not mine. The pad at the base of the thumb a little heavier. The second ridge of the index crooked by a lifetime of martial habits. The whorl was familiar the way an old path is. Your feet remember it. Of course, I whispered, and it was not relief. It was irritation at being right too late. Ethan's handprint. On my mirror. In my room. Not actually. Not physically. But the glass-kept books nobody else knew how to audit. He had been here all along, in that way of his, on the right floor, the right hallway, the right breath. Behind me, the apartment door unlocked. Not a knock, a key. The sanctified official chime that means you consented to this once in a clause you didn't read. The hairs along my arms stood up in a small, nervous salute. Mr. Hale? A voice from the entry. A man who pronounces vowels like he polishes them. Resident verification. I didn't turn. I saw him in the mirror, Ryan. A tidier shape than his shadow in my head. The same hard mouth, the same neat eyes. Past him, Ethan's shoulder hit the door jamb like a question that didn't want to be asked where anyone could hear the answer. Ryan clocked the bathroom door open, my body at the mirror, the cat performing ritual exorcism on a pane of glass. Sir, he said, and the word did not have a temperature. We'll need to see your identification and emergency contact. I'm in the middle of grooming, I said, because I always argue with the smallest word first. I can present as civilized in 30 seconds. Ethan didn't step into the bathroom, but he didn't step away either. In the mirror, our eyes met without the pretense of a line of sight. He saw my face blanch, then color, then smooth to the neutral expression I paid rent for. He glanced once at the sink. The reflection, the wrong reflection, took that as invitation. The glass flexed. The blood brightened. The girl's gaze found mine and didn't accuse, just asked that we agree the moment existed. The boy's skinny arm, the scar line I had seen on Ethan's wrist, jerked as if feeling the blade a second time out of solidarity. The hand, my hand, not my hand, pressed to the mirror as if reaching for the only solid thing in a collapsing frame. Ryan didn't react. Of course he didn't. The mirror only does its extra work for the people who owe it an explanation. But Ethan flinched, not outwardly, not in any way a camera would mark, but in the way a violin admits a note that wasn't written. IDs, Ryan said, not looking where I was looking. He stayed in the living room, already unzipping a folder full of forms to make the search sound like paperwork. I set my wallet on the counter. Ethan's gaze tracked the place where my hand met my reflection. The outline of a palm print sat on the glass like frost. You're not a killer, he said. Quiet enough for the tile to drink. The words weren't meant for Ryan or the room. They were meant to anchor me where I stood. You just don't know how to stop when you're protecting. It wasn't absolution. It was topology. A map that fit the ground, the panic that had been cataloging items in me through its clipboard. All the tidy boxes broke. Anger is cleaner than fear. It gives you something to hold. I made a fist around nothing and punched. The mirror split like a bright mouth. The sound was surgical, high, precise, and full of a satisfaction I hadn't expected. Cracks tore in radial lines from the point of my knuckle, a spider with fury instead of legs. Shards bit my skin and fell to the sink in glittering punctuation. Morph leapt backward with the outraged chirp of someone who has seen an etiquette violation. Blood did what blood does. It looked too red for the room. Ryan was at the doorway before the first shard settled, his folder snapping shut with a reflex clack. "Sir," he said sharply. "Step away." I slipped, I said, because I'm only good at small lies when they're obvious. Ethan didn't move toward me or away. He looked at the wrecked mirror, at the spider-webbed version of my face multiplied into a hive of strangers. He looked down. Shards had fallen across the counter in a cold constellation. In them we stood shoulder to shoulder in 50 little frames, me too pale, him too steady, both of us cut into manageable pieces. In some slivers the ghost scenes still clung, the hand, the girl's eyes, a smear of a rainy stairwell. But most showed the now. 2 men, one bleeding, one breathing like he'd given himself limits on purpose. Ryan reached for the first aid kit under the sink, because of course he knew where it was. He set gauze and saline on the counter with brisk competence. "That was unwise," he said, without judgment. He never judged. He indicted. "Occupational hazard," I said, and couldn't tell if I meant breaking or protecting. Ethan finally stepped into the doorframe proper. "Not closer." "Close enough." "Let me," he said, and Ryan hesitated half a centimeter before deferring. Pack dynamics are funny like that. The man who can smell a lie gets the gauze. He took my wrist. His fingers were warm, dry, unshaking. He turned my hand palm up, checking for glass with the neat attention he gave to everything that might bite later. He cleaned the blood like he'd been taught to waste neither time nor saline. When he pressed the gauze, he did it with a pressure that would stop the bleed and nothing else. The scar on his own inner arm flashed and hid again as he worked. "Breathe," he said, which was either an order or mercy. "Always taking notes," I said, because if I didn't laugh, I might confide. In the mirror shards, we were assembled, not as enemies, not as strangers, but as a geometry I recognized. With a shock, 2 people making a right angle against a world that didn't know which way was up. Our shoulders aligned, an unintentional stance I knew from days when you put your back to someone and dared anything else to try. Mina's text pinged distantly, as if the building were underwater, stalling. "You owe me a muffin." A heroic muffin. Ryan cleared his throat. "Identification." I nodded at the wallet. "Top slot. The one with the picture where I look like I pay taxes." He flipped it open. He looked at the card the way you look at a photo of someone you used to know but haven't met yet. I could feel him doing math he didn't have all the numbers for. Once upon a time he'd known my tells. Now he was looking at a man who wore none of them. "Emergency contact?" he asked. "Hoa," I said. Mina would be devastated if she wasn't first to know I bled on a fixture. Ethan taped the gauze with neat loops, an economy that would make a corpsman proud. He didn't look at Ryan. He looked at me like someone steadying a picture while you drive a nail. "Accident," he said aloud, "for the record." Ryan's eyes flicked to the broken glass, to the distance between my fist and the worst of the cracks. To the cat, offended, to the man holding my wrist as if it were a small, stubborn machine. "Of course," he said, "because the truth does not always need to be believed to be entered in the ledger." He finished the form. He thanked me for my cooperation. He told me to file a maintenance request. He said the words we say to show it's all ordinary, even when the floor is a fraction off level and everyone is compensating. When they turned to go, Ethan's gaze snagged on a shard of mirror leaning against the faucet. In it, our faces overlapped so perfectly I could have pretended it. Was a single person with 2 expressions. Mine braced, his intent. "Careful," he said quietly, lifting the shard and setting it aside as if it were capable of wanting. "You'll cut yourself again." "I do that," I said. "I know," he said. Then he left with Ryan, footsteps receding down a hallway that had never sounded so long. I stood in a room that insisted on being a confession. Blood dried in a fine line along my knuckles. Morph climbed the counter like a helpful ghost and put a paw, careful, velveted, on my wrist, as if to claim me from further stupidity. In the pieces of mirror we were still there, shoulder to shoulder, multiplied enough to look like a promise. Morning rinsed the city, but didn't make it new. The storm had passed, leaving Iris Tower with a hangover of light, everything too bright, too honest. My bathroom mirror was a constellation of damage I hadn't reported. Cracks radiated in clean geometry from the point where my fist had found relief. The glass still worked in every practical sense. It simply told the truth now, whether you asked it to or not. Across the atrium, the world doubled. Panes catching panes, a grid of frames that all tried to be the original. In my mirror, the city behind me arrived twice, once as itself and once as the version a sheet of injured glass believed in. I had slept badly and not enough. Morph, Mercy in a fursuit, made the morning noises of a thing that has never doubted food. I fed him. I washed the blood that had dried in a line across my knuckles. I avoided calling maintenance because I didn't want a stranger to stand where last night had happened and fail to see it. When the knock came, it wasn't a knock. The bolt clicked with the practiced discretion of a key that had been signed out and logged. The door opened a degree and paused like a breath held on purpose. Jasper, Ethan said. Not a question. A name handed back. I should have made a joke. I should have put on a face that belonged to a man who had nothing to hide and no reason to be angry. I stood instead and let the thin, clean heat of anger do its simpler work. Were you playing me this whole time? I asked. My voice surprised me. It wasn't loud. It was accurate. He came inside and shut the door with the care of someone who didn't want the weather to change more than it already had. He didn't go nearer than he needed to. He didn't set down the invisible weight he always carried. The apartment's reflections assembled him from angles, the window offering a profile, the fridge door a shoulder, the cracked bathroom mirror slicing his face into three versions, the one that watched, the one that guarded, the one that listened. No, he said. But I knew who you were. The phrase landed with the dull, inevitable thud of a book closing to the page you always knew you'd reach. I laughed once, the kind that doesn't have humor in it. And you thought, audit day would be a perfect time to drop by with a compliment. His mouth acknowledged that line, then let it go. I wanted to make sure you were alive, he said. A pause that didn't waste itself, and that I wasn't wrong about you. I didn't move, because movement would have admitted the tremor that wanted to live in my hands. Wrong how? The shape of what you are, he said, and it was such a strange kindness I almost didn't recognize it. People say killer and mean one thing. I've seen the other kind. The other kind, I said, because I needed him to say it. The kind that keeps doing the thing long after it stops looking like protection from the outside. His eyes flicked toward the bathroom door and back, as if even the idea of the mirror could cut. You don't stop when you start. That's not the same as what he was. He didn't attach a name to the man we both meant, the one who had forced the knife into a room where children were. I let the anger breathe. You stood in my doorway and smelled me like a file. You shadowed an audit through my home. You watched me bleed and you didn't say my name. He took the last observation without deflection. I've been looking for you for years, he said, and the words were stripped of theater. I kept finding the wrong men. What did you want with the right one? I asked. It came out more raw than I'd planned. To say thank you, he said, and then to do something harder. To not let what you did be used against you forever. I hate sincerity when it announces itself. He didn't. He laid it on the counter alongside his hands and let it sit there, unwrapped and unguarded. The light from the long window fell across his forearms. The scar I knew, the white thread on his inner arm, flashed and went quiet where the sleeve shadowed it. I let myself picture it his way, because sometimes you need to see the story you're about to refuse. A hallway bleached by endless cleaning. A hospital bed too big for the girl in it. Her hair shaved in a stubborn line where stitches glittered. The boy from the stairwell older by a mile and 3 heavy days. A nurse who spoke in good news like a second language but didn't know how to pronounce relief. Outside the window, a sky so blue it felt like someone else's weather. Ethan didn't step around me to look for this memory like a souvenir. He kept his eyes on mine and let his mouth do the remembering. She woke up and asked for a man who didn't have a name, he said. She remembered everything except his face. She said he smelled like clean metal and rain. His voice thinned for a syllable and then steadied. I told her I would find him. You found a lot of liars along the way, I said. It wasn't a question. Men who wanted to be the hero of a story they didn't stay for, he said. Men who practiced the lines. You learn to tell when gratitude will make you stupid. And when will it? I asked before I could stop baiting him. When it starts to look like forgiveness for things that haven't been named yet, he said, not taking the hook. I didn't come here to absolve you. No, I said, surprised at how much relief came dumped in that single syllable. Good. I don't want the room to tilt that fast. Morph leapt onto the counter and inspected Ethan's sleeve as if checking for contraband. He didn't hiss. He didn't purr. He filed a report and sat down on it. Ethan reached out and touched the cat's head in a precise, respectful line, the way men who don't want to get bit show honest intent. Do you want to know what I saw in the glass? I asked. I saw, he said. I thought of the mirror's tricks, the way it had taken my present and run the past over it like a wet hand over ink. I couldn't tell if the phenomenon was a haunting or an honesty projector. Both, maybe. The storm had changed the barometric pressure inside what I'd been able to pretend was a steady room. You can't love someone who is killed, I said. And there it was, the blade. I had been rehearsing, the argument I had saved from myself and others. It should have drawn blood. He stood quietly inside it. I can smell lies, he said. And right now, there's none. The sentence seated itself so simply you could have missed it. It didn't crow or plead. It just arrived and looked at me like weather, as untouchable and as certain. Something in my chest that had been leaning against an inside wall sat up and listened. The room didn't change. The light didn't improve. But the feeling of measuring myself against a wrong ruler eased. Damn it, I said, and laughed. It broke free in one clean, helpless line. You're insufferable. Accurate, he said. The corner of his mouth remembered how to be human. I can file a form about it if that helps. Please don't, I breathed. I let myself look toward the bathroom. I'm not replacing the mirror. That's your right, he said, then paused. And you're wrong. I glanced back. He was watching the broken plane, the way you watch a door you've already decided to walk through. I don't mean call maintenance, he added. I mean, it's showing you two things. If you keep it broken, it will keep making you choose which one is truer. That's exhausting. What's your suggestion? I asked. Keep it until you know how to look without flinching, he said. Then change it because you want to, not because you're trying to make the past behave. Is this the part where you tell me healing isn't linear? I asked. No, he said. This is the part where I tell you glass cuts in the same places over and over if you keep your hands where you keep them. I walked to the bathroom and stood with him just outside the door, as if we were both humoring a superstitious rule about thresholds. Morning light came in at a clever angle through the window and found the fractures. It refracted until the two of us, in the debris, became a single plausible person. In one shard my mouth was set like his. In another, his eyes were tired like mine. In the largest piece, our shoulders aligned like men bracing a doorway neither of us had asked to own. Say it again, I said, because repetition sometimes pins a truth where it can't wriggle free. You're not a killer, he said softly. You don't know how to stop when you're protecting. That's a hard problem. It's not the same problem. The city behind us doubled again in the cracked pane, then settled. My face and his face, two columns of a ledger that did not have to be adversarial math. Sunlight threaded through the damaged glass and made one clean band across. Both our chests, a stripe neither of us had earned, and both of us accepted. I drew a map, he said, voice low. Hospitals, precincts, stairwells people forgot to repaint. I followed rumors that smelled like rain and metal, and found men who'd borrowed pieces of you to make themselves bigger. I kept thinking, if I find him, I'll say thank you, and he'll say it was nothing, and I'll know if he's lying. He looked at me then so plainly that my throat went tight. You're not lying. My shoulders dropped like I'd been carrying something on a hanger. I don't know how to be anything other than this. I gestured at the room, at the mirror, at the careful life I had glued together out of missing pieces and obligation. I don't stop when I start. That's saved people and ruined things. It's not a neat story. I'm not here for neat, he said. I'm here because my sister is alive, and because you are. We stood there, two men in a clean apartment that smelled like post-storm sun on glass and weak coffee. Morph threaded himself between our ankles, and deciding we were decorative statues, abandoned us for a sun-warmed square of floor. You should hate me, I said, because some parts of me were still running programs written when I was younger and more certain. I don't, he said. I did sometimes during the looking. That wasn't you. That was what the search does to a person who keeps not finding what he owes. A laugh came up in me like a cough. You speak like a report. On paper, he allowed. I turned my hand over. The gauze Ryan had wrapped was clean. The skin beneath pulled a little when I flexed my fingers. I want to be angry at you longer. You can, he said. I'll stand here. It won't move the facts. The facts. On paper, a mirror broken by a man whose past refused to stay in the frame. A security chief with a scar that matched a boy who once tried to make his body into a shield. A city reflecting itself, until it found a version it liked. Tell me what you want now, I said. After thank you, he breathed in through his nose, slow, the way he tasted complicated rooms. To help you stop when you need to, he said. To keep other people from writing your story for you with evidence you're not there to annotate. To see if we can make this place. He tipped his chin toward Iris Tower. Meaning more than the building. Something other than a cage. I should have told him all the ways that was naive. I cataloged them. I kept them. I did not say them. Instead, I nodded at the cracked mirror. Stand here with me, I said, and tell me if you see one person or two. We aligned ourselves in front of the glass. Sunlight fractured and mended across our shoulders. For a beat that tasted like a beginning, the refractions did a small, private miracle. The two columns of us slid into place and held. Not a perfect overlap, a slight offset like a heartbeat, but enough that the mind accepted it. Two reflections insisting. One, he said at last, not as romance, not as prophecy, but as observation. One, I agreed. The word felt like a truce I could live with. Behind us, the city stopped doubling. Or maybe we did. Either way, the room breathed. The day got on with itself. And for the first time since the mirror broke, I could look at myself and not flinch. Several weeks is what the city needs to forget the weather, and what bureaucracy needs to admit it was raining. Iris Tower dried out. The lobby plants recovered from their dramatic droop. Mina declared the mold crisis emotional, not biological. I learned that sleep tastes different when no one is actively looking for the version of you that fits a form. The case, the one that had started before this building and these windows, in a stairwell that never bothered to finish drying, was reopened and then closed again, the right way this time. I had expected the process to feel like a parade or a punishment. Mostly it felt like administrative quiet, inboxes answered, stamps on paper, the sound of a door you don't have to check twice. Ryan brought the last folder himself. He didn't stand in the doorway like a threat or an apology. He put the manila on my table and smoothed the corner that hadn't needed smoothing. I'm done here, he said. He'd always been neat about endings, even when we were good. He pushed the folder toward me with 2 fingers, a gesture that used to mean you're up. A note was clipped to the top, with the kind of office clip that masquerades as a decision. In Ryan's careful print, there are lies that save. I prefer truth, he added, because he was allergic to being misunderstood. But I understand triage. Coming from you, I said, that's almost poetry. He accepted the jab without flinching. You built a life, he said, as if reporting on a structure he could respect, if not love. Try not to burn it down protecting it. I almost said that's not how I burn and didn't. We shook hands. His grip felt the same as the old days. Exact, not competitive, a working handshake. He left without looking back. People who know how to leave seldom do. Morph patted over, sniffed the folder, and sat on it. He didn't purr, he notarized. Mina celebrated with a pie the size of a satellite dish. She arrived with it like a weather event. Door flung open, hair a glossy argument with gravity, voice already narrating. Exoneration pie, she sang, because in her doctrine, pastry is a sacrament. I wanted to make a banner, Jasper, but the HOA reminded me banners are a fire hazard, and so is my typography. Ethan followed her in carrying plates and a thermos, and for once he didn't look like a chaperone to her cyclone. He looked like he belonged inside it. There was a moment, early on, when I thought he made rooms careful. Now he made them coordinated. Mina installed the pie in the center of my table, as if docking a ship, and produced A knife from her bag that I'm fairly sure had never left its scabbard in a kitchen. "For ceremonial use only," she said, and sliced with the solemnity of a judge. "Speak now or forever chew quietly." "Thank you," I said, which was insufficient. I tried again. "For the elevator. For the cardio you did to stall a man who can smell insincerity." She preened, and then waved a compliment at Ethan. "Don't look at me, look at this one for keeping the wolves organized. Also, tea." She wagged the thermos. "The good kind that smells like you're about to make up with someone." Ethan set out cups. Morph hopped onto a chair and regarded the thermos with suspicion. Mina flicked a crumb off his ear with the authority of a monarch decreeing cleanliness. Morph did not scratch her. For Mina, even cats observe bylaws. We ate. The pie was one of those nonsense miracles that tastes like a memory, even the first time you meet it. The room softened. The light through the long window turned warm enough to flatter the cracked mirror down the hall. Mina narrated everyone's feelings in bullet points. Ethan corrected her twice. She accepted neither correction. When she finally left, pie diminished but still ridiculous. Promises of further administrative joy in the group chat. Morph did something unprecedented. He walked a measured circle around Ethan's feet, paused like a judge considering a sentence, and then leaned into his shin with a noise that couldn't be misread. A purr. Small, firm, declarative. "Congratulations," I said. "You've been certified by the only authority I respect." Ethan didn't grin. He did something I've come to recognize as his version of it, an adjustment to the way his face sits, less guarded, an easy gravity. He reached down and knuckled the top of Morph's head, with that precise respect he gives to living things that have chosen him. When the door clicked shut behind Mina, the room exhaled. The city beyond our window was performing its late afternoon trick, pretending it would be evening forever. I poured the last of the tea into our cups and leaned against the counter. "You're cleared," Ethan said. Not a question. A status change, catching up to a fact. "It's over." "It's never over," I said out of habit, and then realized I didn't believe it the same way I used to. "But the part where other people write the ending is—" He nodded. There was a small silence, comfortable like a well-worn pocket. He broke it as if he'd rehearsed being casual and decided against it. "Come work with me," he said. I laughed. "At the altar of badge readers." "At the part where the building is honest on purpose," he said. "Security, officially. Unofficially, the things that fall between forms." He tipped his chin toward the windows, which were doing their own strange math with reflection. "You know how people hide. You know how they tell on themselves without meaning to. I don't need another man who likes writing violations. I need a man who likes not being wrong." "And what would I be?" I asked, not letting him off the hook. "Nose or mirror?" "Both," he said easily. "You smell the pattern. You see the trick glass plays." "You already have a man who smells patterns," I pointed out. "I have a man who smells lies," he corrected. "I want a man who knows when a lie is structural, holds the building up until we can replace the beam." I rested my palms on the counter and tried to pretend my pulse wasn't delighted by the logic. "Pay? Respectable," he said. "Paperwork? Unrespectable," he said, and showed teeth briefly, the flash of someone willing to tell the truth about forms. I looked toward the bathroom, where the fractured pane made two cities of one. "Conflict of interest. If I accept, I'll be tempted to fix things I'm standing in." "That's the only way anything gets fixed," he said. "Stand in it. Listen. Decide what the saving lie is and what the truth can hold. You make ethics sound like furniture assembly. Better screws," he said. "Better drawings." Morph finished his tour of Ethan's ankles and leapt into my lap as if he'd signed the offer letter on my behalf. "Everything in me wants to say yes," I admitted. Then, because I am constitutionally incapable of not making things complicated, in the final stretch, "You're sure this isn't gratitude hiring?" "I'm sure," he said. "Gratitude is loud in the beginning and quiet when it counts. This is the other way around." I pressed my thumb into the seam of the teacup. A neat heat grounded there. "Okay," I said. The word surprised me in how at home it sounded. "Yes." He didn't rush the handshake. He set his cup down, stepped close enough to make the air align, and offered me the plainest version of his palm. It was not a vow. It was logistics with a heartbeat. We shook. Mina would have demanded a selfie. Neither of us moved to take one. Work started before paperwork. I shadowed Ethan's route that week, the way he listens to buildings and people. He watches for the blur, the place where a story tries to clear itself at the edges and doesn't. He taught me the tower's off-grid language, what the elevator cough means, how the garage damp breathes before a rain, which stairwell kids claim as a confessional. I taught him the kinds of metadata human eyes can catch when they're not pretending to be cameras. We became a quiet routine, a counterpoint that made hallways honest. Ryan's absence felt like a healed bruise. If I pressed, there was memory, not pain. He texted once, a photo of a different skyline, a different case. No words. I sent back a picture of Morph with a caption, "This officer approves our compliance." At the end of the week, we took the roof. It was early morning in the way mornings are before the city has had coffee, edges soft, intentions undecided. Iris Tower keeps its roof clean like a reputation. The gravel crunched with a quiet, good sound. A wind had done some housework in the night. The air smelled rinsed. The city stretched around us, towers repeating their own silhouettes, glass reporting on sky. Ethan unslung a thermos from a bag that had seen years of competent carrying. He poured into one cup and then the other, handing me mine like a ceremonial object. "Tea?" he offered. "You're very consistent," I said. "Mina would say this is reconciliation tea." He held up his cup. "We can reconcile being on the same roof." We drank. It tasted like green things and patience. "It's strange," I said, "to feel finished and not empty." "It's the absence of the chase," he said. "Most people think they want it back. They don't. They want the part after, when the air moves without asking permission." "Poetic," I said. "You're rubbing off." We stood at the parapet. The city poured itself in light. A window in the tower opposite caught us and turned us into two sensible lines on a high surface. "I've been thinking about glass," I said. "Occupational hazard." "I broke mine," I said. "You saw." "I keep thinking that's the first honest thing I did in that room." He didn't nod. He considered it as if it were a maintenance request. Maybe. Or maybe the honest thing was looking at what it showed without making it pretty. "What do you do with honest things, once you have them?" I asked. He poured the last of the tea, the thermos admitting defeat with a friendly squeak. "You hold them. You put them where you can't trip over them. You ask the person beside you to carry the ones that weigh weird." "Distribution of truth," I said. "New department. We'll need nameplates." He glanced at me, amusement, an undercurrent. "You can order them. I'll fix the badge readers when they arrive misprinted." I reached into my pocket and produced a cloth I'd brought for a different purpose. Carefully, like I was cleaning something sacred, I rubbed the glass panel of the parapet where salt and dust had made a soft film. A slow polish, small circles, warmth from my palm moving into the pane. The city sharpened. Our reflections did too, two men in jackets, thermos between them, cups already telling the story of having been used. "Streaks," I said, mildly annoyed. "Even when you do it right." "Proof of contact," he said. I left a small fog of breath on the pane and wrote nothing through it, which is my version of restraint. Beside my half-polish, the untouched glass kept a history of weather I hadn't contributed to. The line between was visible, then not, then visible again, when the sun decided to say so. Somewhere deep in the tower's skeleton, a mechanical system shifted from night mode to day, a hum in the bones that felt like acknowledgement. "Jasper," he said. "Yes. Do you ever think about the stairwell?" he asked, not to reopen a wound but to indexing how far we'd walked from it. "Less," I said. "Enough." He set his cup down, hands empty. "Good." We leaned there, the easy angle of people operating at the same height for once. A small selfish thought crossed my mind and surprised me with its softness. I wanted this morning the way I used to want results. Wind lifted and laid down again. Somewhere, a train objected to its own schedule. The city turned its face to what came next. "Say something smug," I told him, "because humor is a reflex and also an invitation." He considered. "Want to catch people who lie worse than you?" he asked, mild as an HR form and kinder. "I've already said yes," I reminded him. "Say it again." "Yes," I said, and the word had the clean snap of a sheet unfurling. He lifted the thermos like a toast. We finished the tea. The line of trash cans along the rooftop edge looked briefly ceremonial. The edges of the day hardened into actual plans. Following the scent then, I said, not to be poetic, but because there wasn't a better verb. But not to hunt, to shepherd, to redirect, to keep the building honest, he said. And the people in it. I set my empty cup on the parapet and watched our reflections catch and hold. You know, I said, the thing about glass, people think the goal is to polish it until there's no trace, but the best paints always keep a little. Proteins, dust, a whisper of hand. It's how you know you live there. Show me, he said, as if I were demonstrating a feature of something we co-owned. I crouched, pressed my palm to the lower corner, where wind doesn't reach as aggressively. Warmth, print, a small private signature. I lifted my hand. The mark faded, then returned when the light changed its mind. I smiled at nothing. Before I could say anything flippant, a soft weight landed on the ledge 3 feet away. Morph, who had followed us in the elevator without announcing his presence like a criminal with a badge, tested the roof with a careful paw and then, satisfied with his jurisdiction, strolled to the glass. Officer, I said, for the record. He set one paw against the pane. Not a scratch. A placement. The pad pressed, the toes spread. He held it like a formality, and then withdrew. On the glass, the clean oval of a paw print bloomed, ridiculous and perfect, a seal you'd affix to a letter you meant. I didn't breathe. I didn't have to. The mark held. In it, the city inverted, a tiny world under a cat's name. Ethan's reflection moved closer to mine until we were side by side in the pane, shoulder to shoulder. The morning light caught us and refused to separate us completely. You could count 2 outlines if you insisted. You could also, easily, decide there was one, offset by a heartbeat. Glass smudges if you rub hard enough, I said, finally. The old line working a new job. And if you leave it? He asked. Then it becomes home, I said. We stood there a while longer, 2 silhouettes at the high edge of a building that had been a cage and could now be a perch. The paw print stayed where Morph left it, a small proof that being here had weight. The city didn't care, and somehow did. And when we finally turned to go inside, the reflection kept up with us like a friend who had decided to stay.